So one of the things that we were really focusing on is how do we incorporate technology? How do we get technology to do more for our purposes in the fundraising world? How can we be reaching more people? How can we be engaging and providing more of an educational base based on best practices for your purposes? But 30 days ago, four astronauts went and circled around the moon. A lot of that is really based on, the technologies that had led up to that moment, and they returned home successfully. Uh, 30 days ago, I didn't realize that my friend, a farmer, uh, who has incorporated in one of the oldest professions known, farming, agriculture, has incorporated AI into his farming. And when we start to look at how that has all come together in terms of what it is that we're endeavoring to do, he ended up getting a robo dog to actually, with LiDAR around its head, to actually be going out and sniffing out fungus, bacteria in his crops. Now, this dog was also able to do backflips and side flips and do a lot of other things that and probably has very sharp teeth that could probably, do some damage to people as well. But more importantly, we're starting to see how technology and artificial intelligence and how it all comes together are becoming a fit with our daily lives. And how can we be making things, producing a better return on investment, like the farmer who actually looked at, if I could shrink the damage to my crops, and by being able to focus on capturing where the fungus or the bacteria is, like that is a return on investment, not only for his efforts, but also on, food and agricultural economies of scale. So when we start to look at what we do as fundraisers, we're always trying to push the envelope in terms of how to bring the latest and greatest, ways of thinking from yourselves as well as from our own practices. So, again, my name is Bill Petrick. I'm the founder of Funding Matters. Funding Matters was established in 1997 with an objective just to be advancing, the best practices in philanthropy and philanthropic planning for individuals and individual-based giving. But one of the things that we really looked at from all of that is the ability to actually incorporate, vertically integrate technologies for the benefit of making fundraising and your efforts far more cost effective, efficient, because we are going to realize as we go through this the constraints that we face, the face in time and talent and tools and things like that. How do we package all of that together? And once again, I am joined by our team at Funding Matters, but most importantly, we are joined by our two presenters today as well. We've got James Murphy, experienced trainer, fundraiser, major gift consultant, planned giving consultant, organizational expertise that brings a fresh perspective on not only the intersection of training and consultation or organizational development, but also how new technologies are being embraced and how training methods are being built out. And secondly, once again, Kensho Ando Hang is again he's the youngster amongst us, and but he brings that young, aggressive perspective on what is possible. How we if we looked at a moonshot, how we're looking at moonshots in philanthropy. How can we be taking philanthropy and the work that we're doing and taking it to the next level to engage with our donors? So today, our topic du jour has been, we spent a considerable amount of time doing research around this, but the focus is really on how can we be incorporating major gifts and planned giving within the context of AI. And Kensho, if your thoughts on just bringing these things together, James, I'm really excited about this for everyone who's on today's webinar, but also we're recording it so that it'll be part of the Funding Matters uh, YouTube channel. Again, you can just reference a lot of this there as well.
Great. Well, nice to meet you all. My name is Ken Sho. I've been in the AI consulting space for really since the start of the whole AI craze when ChatGPT and all these models popped up. So while I look young, I would say, pretty experienced in the AI space, and that's really why I'm here is helping business owners, founders, donors, organizations, all of you really navigate this crazy world of AI. And that's really what I'm here is to listen to the different type of thoughts people have and really merge in the crazy, amazing stuff Bill has been also looking at and James has amazing perspective on as well. So really, I would say for all of you here, it's being on this webinar is already one step towards understanding and having a little bit of clarity because it is very true. When we hear the word AI, it's a very overwhelming and very hard to navigate space because on one hand you have all these news cases of new AI models, this new AI that you should use this, you've got people selling you AI as well. So without properly understanding the use cases or what actually makes sense, it also does become very overwhelming because you are thinking, oh, should I use it here, should I use it there, maybe I should use it. And the thing is AI can fit in everywhere, so it is also very hard to fit in what is the right use case. So I think when you're listening throughout this webinar, one of the most important things to really think about is not just the idea of AI, but listening to the use cases and the ways that Bill and his team has been testing it out. James has perspective on it as well, connecting the two. And I'll be coming in on a more kind of AI perspective of where does it really fit into your business. But I think holistically, when you leave here, the most important is getting ideas of where does it even fit in, because again, like I said, it is very hard to navigate. There are a lot of different things, but at least having the right spark of direction helps you take the first foot into the right door instead of navigating and getting lost throughout.
So when we start to look at it, we're looking at it from a number of perspectives, as we've talked about. But today we're going to focus on major gifts and planned giving. We know that organizationally, that half of the revenue for an organization comes in from the major gifts and planned giving. If you take sort of the 38% of, almost 40% plus, 9%, it's almost half of the revenue of an organization is coming in from these distinct areas. But there's a real reliance and there's a risk that's associated with just having that heavy reliance on those prospects in those areas. Because when we start to look at where does the revenue actually come from in those areas, it's really coming from, 12% of your donors. And then if we start to look at what about the other donors that are in that area of responsibility, of follow-up, of relationship building. And James, we always looked at this as, the opportunity to grow the revenue base in the area of major gifts and planned giving. But when we start to look at some of the challenges that an organization and a fundraiser may have, we start to look at, if you're not tapping into all of your prospects, if you're not trying to grow your messaging at scale, there may be challenges that the organization, the fundraiser, will face after at year end when they're totaling up the dollars that have been raised.
Yeah, I think that's right. And thanks for all of you for joining us today. Ken shows some great points there too. But, when you look at this sort of 80-20 rule or 90-10 rule, I think the major question is how do you unlock more value with your donors? You've got a lot of, in that 80 or 90% category, you've got a lot of repeat donors, people who sometimes do well in the market, maybe make a higher level gift. So obviously you want to continue to monitor those and move those into the major gift prospects category. But I think where you can really unlock the value, and I think hopefully this webinar will demonstrate some of that, is using these AI tools to make yourself a lot more efficient as a, let's say, tiller of the philanthropic soil, to go back to your friend's farming analogy. I'm not sure I'd say we're dogs sniffing around, but maybe bloodhounds. And I think the one thing that I hear working with a lot of my coaching clients and consulting is the time it takes to build out strategies, to build out information. A lot of places have research departments, will give you background on donors and so on, but even those are becoming overwhelmed. So a lot of major gift fundraisers are spending time doing their own research, building their own profiles, building their own strategies. Very time consuming, going into the CRM, finding out what your colleague who met with them 2 years ago put in there, having to enter your own CRM data. AI can help facilitate all of that and really unlock value. And I think it'll help build out a more rounded strategic approach to donors. You still have to get the meetings. The most valuable thing you can do is a face-to-face meeting with a donor, unquestionably. AI is not going to unlock a magic formula to do that, but I think it'll make a difference in terms of how you thoughtfully prepare a strategy, do the outreach, do the follow-up, and continue to build out the highest return on your investment, which is a major gift donor. A $10,000 donor and a $100,000 donor often, require the same inputs and the same resources, but you're getting a much higher return on investment. So with these AI tools, I think what it can really help us do as fundraisers is unlock a lot of strategic value when we're working with major gifts donors and planned giving donors as well. I think a lot of the profiles here are quite similar.
I'm going to just look at this next slide, James, and let's sort of examine this from the perspective of some of the largest donations that we've ever seen have come about for an organization from the thoughtfully constructed planned gift. And that planned gift really emanated from the fact that that the individual had a relationship with the organization, but somehow, some way, they sort of, whether they attend an event to learn about planned giving, estate planning, planned giving, the idea was that if we start to look at these numbers, we know that these are very common statistics. 49% of donors have included charity in their will, which is wonderful. But that means that almost 90% haven't. So if we start to look at, well, why haven't those individuals included charity in their will? It begs the question of, exploration. And sometimes it's exploration from the fundraiser's perspective, but it's also exploration from the donor's perspective. It's their curiosity in terms of learning more about how they can be benefiting not only their heirs, but also the organizations that are near and dear to them. And so when we start to look at, these numbers, the fact is that we've done presentations where we would bring people together, and it would be like a webinar situation like this during COVID or post-COVID. There really weren't a lot of webinars going on pre-COVID, but we would be bringing people together into the organization's room, boardroom, hall, venue that they would have, and would bring together a series of experts. Those experts would be lawyers, accountants, financial advisors, and it took months. And James, you and I know this, and in terms of organizing these estate planning sessions, where we would do a continental breakfast or a lunch or a dinner, and you might get between 10 to 60 people to show up, which was a tremendous turnout. The idea is that sense of inclusion amongst like-minded individuals who are thinking about their own long-term planning, because that ties in to how effective major gift giving and planned giving is. That element of planning. What do people need to know? Why do they need to know it? How can they be implementing this? And the concept of all of these numbers in terms of, if we have those individuals who have a charitable bequest already there, why did they include it? And then those that don't have a charitable bequest, how does that factor in? How do we bring these people in? How do we provide them with the tools and information that they need to be successful? And so what we found was that the ability to actually outreach and have people sort of self-explore the possibilities of what a planned gift might look like, what an estate gift, what a gift out of a registered investment might be shaped like for them, or more importantly, how a current gift, a major gift out of appreciated assets, might be compared to a donation out of cash versus the securities. So when we start to look at it from that perspective, being able to actually scale and reach more people, uh, given the time constraints that we have and given the time constraints that our donors have as well, having them actually come and take part in the session has its own limitations and challenges as well. But when you start to look at being able to educate people, the individuals where we have seen some of the most outstanding and transformational gifts have been where that individual has sought the additional inquiry about, making this type of a gift, connected with their advisors. And then from that discussion between the organization, the charity, the advisor, and the donor, this is where magic happens. And it is within the realm of doing something that where you can scale it, because we always go back to that statement that you never know who your next donor is going to be. But having this as a component in that really helps transform that. And
I
James,
think that point about self-exploration too, because look, leaving a gift in your will sounds like a simple thing, but in fact, it raises a whole host of questions because that's something you're doing instead of giving it to your kid or giving it to something else. So as a donor starts to think about structured giving, and all the ways and tools that are available, there's a lot of questions that come up. And having a tedious conversation with a donor about that may not be the most productive way, but I think allowing them a gateway to explore some of these questions and say, well, what's the impact if I do this? What's the impact if I do that? Really helps you, Bill, as you say, to scale this work and begin to have more conversations of this type of complexity that are even beyond sort of major gift conversations.
indeed, yeah. So this is what we're always looking at. And this is, again, Kensho, James, we can always jump in on this, the gap that exists in terms of, so when we start to look at that 80-20 rule, 90-10 rule, whatever it happens to be, that, 12% of your funders. But the reality is we're challenged with time. Most organizations are seeing the impact of doing more with less. And, the management from the DOs across the board is about 150. And our conversations with some of our ongoing clients in this area is that they're looking at, having their DOs, manage like 100 of the 150 with who are active donors, active major gift donors. How can they be advancing those into higher giving levels? How can they be introducing this? And then the other 50 are, ones that could potentially be moved into this prospect category. Time is, the fact is that you're giving 1 hour of your time today is greatly appreciated, because we just want, again, we want to make sure that you're going to be able to walk away with some knowledge, some insights, some of the tools and tactics that can benefit you as well. And then, when we get to that point of, that customization to scale, that personalization piece is equally as important. And we start to, that gap is what we're trying to bridge: the time gap, the knowledge gap, the personalization gap of the tools that are required to be successful.
The pushing, more and more administrative tasks are pushed onto the wrong people, which are the major gifts officers. That's not where our value is. That's to the organization. But yet, I work with professionals who've got 15, 20 years experience, and they're basically being told to manage their CRM databases. That's not where the value is. And I think we've got to find a way to get out of that trap and put the emphasis on knowledge and personalization using the tools that we have with AI.
And I'm going to quickly step in here. I think that's a really, really good point, James, is the fact that a lot of people worry on the word AI is going to replace our jobs or completely replace us. But I think if you frame it right, but also use AI in a way that actually frees up the time that you or we as humans are spending on administrative tasks. And I like to say this word, non-thinking tasks, but critical. When I say non-thinking, it's critical. We all, and I myself, I'm culprit to this, have emails, documents, administrative things that do not move if you don't touch it. but need to be moved because other things are on the pipeline because of it. And if AI is at a certain level able to actually take back that 4 or 5 hours that you're clicking through emails, drafting emails, looking at the documents, and instead summarize that or have a draft ready or have all that ready for you, where your most important role as a human is verification, reviewing it, approving it, and making sure you did that due diligence, then that 4 or 5 hours you just saved now allows you to focus on what really matters, which is maybe your thinking was required to move the strategy forward. Or maybe you realize the entire campaign hasn't moved. Why? Because the team needed your thinking or your brainstorming or strategy to actually move to the next phase. But because every week from 9 to 5, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you've realized you've been doing that 4 or 5 hours of admin tasks. And let's say you add another 3 hours with meetings, you've actually achieved nothing in that entire day. And that snowballs to the next, to the next, to the next. And what happens is all these snowballs, I personally think, are actually what's dragging down a lot of progress. So instead of framing it as AI will replace your work, think of the fact that, oh, if I could have AI as kind of like my super executive assistant that is there to do all of that, prepare everything ready for me, where I just do, yep, yep, yep. How much time could that really open up to you to do a lot more? And I think that's where we're really trying to connect the dots in the charitable giving space and in the relationship space with the donors and all these different things. Because if you're able to take up all those different tasks and put it into AI and actually focus on the relationship with the donor and actually create that connection or think what the donor might actually need or what your organization needs to expand that, wow, I think there's a lot more we could do there.
Yeah. Great points.
Awesome.
Excellent. So let's look at just, very simple numbers, okay? A 1% increase. If we had a 1% increase right across, our organizations, small organizations have about 3,000 donors, 2,000 to 3,000 donors. Large organizations, medium to large, have 10,000 donors, and the institutions have hundreds of thousands of donors on a basis that they can be drawing from. But if we actually took 1% of those 10,000 donors from the medium-sized organizations, and we use that average that we showed earlier on about what the average range might be for a planned gift bequest. And we use the number 50,000, we're going to be looking at a $5 million outcome. So what we're really saying is if you could actually work with your donor pool, like the total donor pool, again, not knowing what your next donor, who your next donor may be, where they may come from, but to go to all of these donors is a mammoth task that would be very difficult to actually bring in front of all of your prospects, for your development officers to be doing all of that typical type of outreach. But when you're starting to actually be able to scale, to actually bring this out in terms of, providing the insight, knowledge, the comfort and ease that individuals can actually be playing around for themselves, it will uncover a lot of the built-in areas of curiosity and interest, and kind of break down some of the questions that individuals have that they might need to find that from other advisors. So what we're not saying is that AI would be the advisory capacity. AI would be the answer. It would be an information source to a lot of the questions that individuals have, as opposed to actually going out and onto something like Google and just, Googling something. You're not really going to be getting the answer that you're technically looking for, but also the transformation in AI, even in the last month, 12 months, 24 months, since we've been doing AI for the last 5 years, what's transpired in the last 30 days, 60 days is the fact that individuals can actually, development officers can be building their own AI smart, virtual philanthropic officers, so that they can actually take all of those functions that take place on an ongoing basis, and they can focus on the higher level activities that they would be able to focus on in engaging with donors and creating outreach on communications, to be working with, within their CRMs and so on and so forth, and undertaking the prospect identification and research that could be building onto their bases. But this is like sort of an ideal number, that if you could get 1% of your donors to be actually looking at thinking about making a bequest, increasing the number, then you're going to be tapping into some newfound revenue streams that currently may not exist. So I guess because it's starting off with artificial intelligence, Kensho, it's just the combination of all of these things that we were talking about as your virtual philanthropic officer, that VPO, that we look at in terms of, going from top to bottom.
I think the future of AI and over the past few months actually has moved from just AI that is more of a passive assistant that, and I think this is something I've started to kind of picture myself, is when we use tools like ChatGPT and even the general AI models that most of us have probably at least sent one message to. The biggest caveat with that in the past is that even if you were to ask it to draft or write an email, it'll write the draft, it'll write the outreach, template. But the biggest thing that it doesn't actually do is take that template and put it into your email or execute on that. And that has actually caused a kind of weird shift in the AI space where people are like, oh, well, it's really good for planning, but my execution or the speed of which I was doing tasks is still actually the exact same as before. The only thing is now, instead of writing my email, it's drafting it, but I'm still copying it. I'm going to my email, I'm taking it on, I'm pasting it, and I'm still pressing send. So actually, Bill has mentioned a few kind of whole ideas of this virtual philanthropic officers moving into a world of AI, which is called agentic AI. And you have probably heard words like this, but at a very simple level, agentic AI is now AI that is able to take actions on your behalf. It is able to connect with Gmail, your calendar, all these different things, and actually do things such as maybe change your meetings, or even on the outreach side of things, look at the email, draft it according to that person, and have that draft ready to send. Now, these are just some ideas, but as Bill is showing here, there's so many ways you can use agentic AI as well. So like, Bill and I were playing around with a tool the other day where we were just like, hey, let's find us 100 most relevant prospects for us. And we just said, hey, these are a few things we're looking for as a ideal client profile. And we just said, go. And it started going and doing the research itself. It started clicking through websites, looking for the actual, prospects that might fit. So I think this is something to really think about, that we're actually shifting into a world where the AI can do tasks. And the most important thing to frame here is we do still have control. And it is important to still have control, because some people go, I'm just going to give the AI to do everything. And then they just kind of get lazy. Even when the AI says, can you please check? They're like, let me just press enter and send every time. Those are when you see mistakes or errors. AI is great, but it's not 100% great yet. And that's where we come in to do the final loop and the final check. But what we're really getting upon here with this whole agentic AI and all these different use cases here is that it can really start moving from just planning and ideation to execution. And if you're able to use it right and add your own personal ways that you are still keeping your human element to it, or human checking per se, that's where you can actually make a lot of benefits from it. So I think it's trying to reframe how you're going to use it, but also ahead of time is looking at use cases like this, thinking ahead, what might actually help my organization or myself. What kind of initial task might actually open up a lot of time. And when you think of that, where else do I need to make sure that I tell the AI, do not do this before I check, or please send me a verification beforehand? These are all things that you can now actually kind of tell the AI. And the cool thing about a lot of these new AI agents are that you can quite literally just tell it, do not send a message, and it'll remember that, right? It's not like before you have to code or add some crazy things. So I think that's going to be a very cool future.
So we start to look at, how do we, we developed a platform that allows not only the understanding about smart giving conversations, uh, information about the organization so that it's organization specific and so that a donor may be inquiring about what's taking place. What are you building? What are you raising funds for? So what your priorities happen to be, and more importantly, matching their priorities with your priorities. How do we kind of bring the two together so that we have that, that personalization, that customization for them? But more importantly, how do we then start these smart giving conversations? How do we engage in understanding, what a good opening line is? How do we get a meeting with a donor? What is that opening line going to look like? How do we, if we have that meeting, how's that meeting going to move forward? But more importantly, then comes back to the affordability. So an individual may have an interest in naming something, but what is the affordability component of them being able to do it, whether it's out of appreciated assets, registered investments, out of a planned gift. So we start to look at the major gift, planned giving, transformational giving construct of, of what this can be shaped to look like for the benefit of the donor. And so that ability to actually show the tax benefits associated with it, it really goes back to Russell James 101. What Russell would be focusing on is smart giving. And so how do we make smart giving, a thing for an individual to understand how they could potentially be giving more from the assets that make sense for them once we actually have their priorities and their interests and their where they'd like to see this go within the organization. So having that ties very nicely to what James was talking about in terms of training and engagement with DOs right across the board. You want to add anything, James, to that?
No, I think that really hits all the key points.
Yeah. So takes us to where we're at today. And today's session, what we want to do is kind of walk you through a demo of showing one example of artificial intelligence and AI in action. And so we're going to take a donor, potential exploring a $50,000 donation, eventually, maybe walking through the differences between securities and cash, but more importantly, being able to answer a lot of the questions they have about a campaign for your organization. And then potentially, a third scenario here with that same individual in that conversation is getting them into a planned giving bequest conversation. So if you just bear with me, I'm just going to just switch screens right now and then jump over to a screen. And basically, we have an opportunity with the AI. And can everybody see that I switched screens? Just to make sure.
Yep.
Good. Okay, great. So the concept here is we're going to have a partner for you to actually, run through a live donor conversation where you can access the conversation. You're going to be given feedback on how that conversation evolved. Or we can just jump to a donor conversation script. And that one, basically by putting some of the context into this. Now, this is something that has been built out around our consulting experience, the training experience, expertise of, what goes into a good donor conversation. So this is one of the elements that we want to talk about that would eventually lead to finding out more about the individual and where the individual can actually be providing insights about themselves along the way, or information that we would have from our CRM about the individual or your CRM about the individual so that they can actually see for themselves what the benefit of incorporating this into this conversation would be. And then finally, it comes back to is it affordable or not? Does it make sense? Where does it make sense where the funding could be coming from? So let's go and practice that live donor conversation. Okay, so we have a microphone here, and basically we can actually go in and say, I would like to schedule a meeting with a donor who's expressed an interest in a naming opportunity for our brand new construction of a wing at our hospital. So I just put that in there. I would like to schedule a meeting with a donor. The ideal outcome. Ideally, the donor would like to have a conversation because she attended one of our events recently, and she expressed interest in doing something to name after her late husband. The donor's name, we're going to say the donor's name is Mary, and the organization. So we're going to actually have the organization is the ABC Hospital in Smallville, and we are looking at expanding our hospital ACE unit, and because her husband was a patient of ours and has been an ongoing and is a grateful patient, was a grateful patient. He passed away. She's a widow. And what we would like to do is look at having a meeting with her to discuss her interests in our upcoming campaign. That's kind of rambling out there. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the donor? Yes, the donor is a widow, and she is a retired school principal. She's on a fixed income. She has a interest in doing something to recognize her late husband because they were so grateful for the care that they received at the hospital. So it's all of that. Tell us about the project. Our campaign is a $100 million new construction addition onto the existing hospital. Our focus is to engage the community and recognize achievements as well as generosity. Ideally, we would like to have Mary consider a $50,000 donation, and she might also consider a planned gift, but it depends on how our conversation goes. Anything else you want to talk about? So we have various languages, and then we can actually go into, you start to see what's happening here. And basically what will take place from these inputs is these three dots just keep on bouncing because they're thinking about all the information that we have incorporated into Builder Bill, and then it basically says, I've reviewed your form. Here's a practice a live donor conversation with Mary, a widow, retired school principal who's interested in naming something at ABC Hospital in honor of her late husband. I'll be stepping into Mary's shoes now. So here's the training. Here's the practice. You're not practicing on Mary. You're actually going to be practicing on Builder Bill. And Bill is going to kind of go through this. You sat down with her following up to and expressed her interest in a recent event that she attended. She's grateful for the care her husband received, but she's also on a fixed income and thinking carefully about this decision. So this is many of the individuals that you're dealing with on an ongoing basis. So you can start the conversation as you would in real life. You can walk into a room at the hospital. Mary's come. She's very punctual. She's there ahead of time, waited, and hello, Mary. Thank you very much for meeting with me. I've been thinking a lot about what we've talked about at the event last month about the new wing. She pauses, glancing. and I'm just not sure where to start. So she doesn't know where to start. So it's really, where do we start? Where do we start this conversation? We can actually go in here and say something. Mary, I really appreciate you making time to come back to the hospital. It was great seeing you at our last event, and I was encouraged to hear about your interest in doing something with the new campaign. We really appreciate your ongoing support over the last number of years and your involvement not only as a donor, but as a active volunteer. So it goes into that and then see what Mary comes back with. And so we can actually go back and forth with this in such a way that Mary will see the benefits associated with this. And this is it that I take the right approach? So Mary's expression softens. Thank you very much. So we can actually go through that and actually hear her.
Mary's expression softens. She clasps her hands together and nods gently. Mary, oh, thank you so much. It really does mean a lot to be here. Volunteering at the gift shop, it's become such a part of my routine. It keeps me connected. She pauses, her eyes briefly returning to the photo on the table. Mary, when I saw the plans for the new wing at the event, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My husband, Robert, he spent his last months in your care, and the nurses, the doctors, they were just wonderful to both of us. Her voice catches slightly, but she continues with a small smile. Mary, I suppose that's why I keep coming back. But I have to be honest with you. She hesitates, fidgeting with her hands. Mary, I want to do something meaningful, something that would honor Robert and everything this hospital did for him. But I'm retired now, on a fixed income, and I'm not entirely sure what's realistic. Does that make sense? She looks at you with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, waiting for your response. Note, you can end the practice conversation at any time by typing end or pause, and Builder Bill will switch to feedback mode.
So let's do that. Let's just pause here and see where this takes us. Because for our purposes, what we want to do is get Mary to understand what the best ways for her to think about giving. It may just be she writes a check. It may be over a period of time. But what we want to do is, as we're going through this process, is to actually be able to answer a lot of the questions for Mary that may entail not only making this naming opportunity donation, but doing it strategically, but also incorporating the option for discussion of a planned gift. So here it'll say what was done well, and what the way it was presented, the ways to improve on it. There she was. She talked about her late husband, concerns on being on fixed income, so which is a big concern for many individuals when they start to think about writing a check. So if they're writing a check as opposed to looking at the other giving options, like a registered investment, like a donation out of appreciated assets, or a combination that may be a combination of a current gift that would be appreciated assets as well as a donation out of her checking account. So one way or another, to spread it out, stagger it over a period of time, getting into conversations about Robert, and having her explain more. And these are things that we go through, but sometimes they're things that we actually can, be prompted and reminded of. And for so many individuals that are coming into philanthropy, fundraising within your organizations, for your volunteers, for your board members, this is also a very strong platform that allows them to actually be having some of these conversations. And then, you can just re-practice the conversation. So it's trying to find somebody to practice this conversation that you would have with Mary, in anticipation of a meeting, or that you can actually be doing this on a 24/7. You could be practicing this at 2 o'clock in the morning, in terms of, you've been waking up and say, well, what's my opening line going to be for Mary? Or how will my conversation go and evolve can I be practicing this scenario? So when I meet with Mary at 9 o'clock in the morning, I'm prepared. And so that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of achieving. And this not only functions well off your computer, but also functions very smartly off your mobile device, that you can actually be playing this role scenario as well, just the same way. But I'll kind of come back to, the presentation at hand, because that kind of gives you a sense of, how to kind of take the next steps and how to have those conversations. And that's the Mary scenario that we had in mind. And then we get to, the stakeholders. And, when we start to look at who the key players are that can be benefiting as a result of this from your efforts, it's, all of your donors. If you have 150 donors, 150 prospects that you're following up with on an ongoing basis, how do you make this, how do you reach them? How do you engage them to get to the next level? How do you engage their advisors? How do you bring the advisors into these conversations? And then finally, how does, this become a Venn diagram between the donor, the advisor, and your organization? And where we have sort of the sweet spot between the three is the ability to actually be building out this ecosystem that benefits, your organization, the donor, and their advisor. James, want to sort of jump in on any of that?
Oh, James, I think you might be muted.
Okay.
I was just reading something the other day about powerful speakers and how much they prepare for these presentations. And I think the incredible value, I mean, I spent a lot of time in coaching with coaching clients going through these exact scenarios. But of course, it's not quite as structured and rigorous, because you can get off target, you can get distracted. And, I think as we become more experienced as major gift fundraisers, we think, we've got this, we've got it covered, we know what to do, we know what to say. But I think having this kind of preparation and grounding as you go into donor conversations, it might not go exactly as it unfolds here, but it's going to be close. It just brings that extra edge to those conversations and allows you to think through a lot of the implications when you're talking about your own organization, you're talking about the donor's interests, even when you're talking about the advisor. A lot of major gifts officers get nervous. They think, I'm going to have to talk to the advisor now. What do I know about this? That's just part of the conversation. But it's good to recognize when that conversation with the advisor might be an appropriate topic to introduce to the donor. Would you like us, to follow up with your accountant, with your lawyer, and bring, this conversation onto a more detailed level?
Indeed. Yeah. So when we're starting to look at the opportunities that are available, we've always talked about this. This has been an ongoing conversation for the last 20 years about the wealth transfer that's taking place, and the opportunity to actually be learning how to be engaging, and how AI is going to be it's a very pervasive tool that the boomers are using and the younger generations are using. And so being able to provide them with those types of tools at their convenience will benefit organizations in the long run. We've had experience in working with individuals in their 80s that are playing around with this, because it's, as Kensho has indicated, it's agentic. It's actually engaging in conversations with individuals to help them answer a lot of the questions that they have. And then how do we start to, bring and, trigger some of these opportunities and bring them from the back of the donor's mind into the forefront, around major gift giving and planned giving, around, their long-term financial plans in the States. And how are we looking at this in terms of adopting AI to be benefiting these individuals? But when we start to, when Kensho and I were talking about, the AI adoption in fundraising, it really ties in with individuals all the way across the spectrum, whether they are a volunteer and they haven't been a donor, whether they're a good annual donor, and how do we move them to the next level of giving all the way along, and then create those stewardship opportunities, because that's the other piece that tends to kind of get moved over to the side and as an afterthought. How do we move stewardship into the forefront? How do we move those thank yous and the engagements and the next steps with them to be having that appreciation? And that's another aspect of AI that ties very importantly with major gifts and planned giving.
That's something you can also build into this model and having those conversations, is to think down the road, how are you going to steward this gift? What's the opportunity? How's the stewardship follow up? I mean, it's infinite. It's like having an extension of your brain to take you through all these possible scenarios.
Right. And so when we start to look at the opportunity and going right back to the beginning, here it says 68% of Americans lack an estate plan. We know, we all know that. How can we be helping them bridge that gap? How is it that what they need to know, like why? Why do I need to have an estate plan? What is an estate plan going to look like? That can all be mapped out very easily, just as the way we were working Mary around her giving. That's one of the things that we were looking at as well. So when we want to do activating that AI powered giving, it's getting, helping you organize, what the pipeline's going to look like, what all the prospects that are there in place. How do we provide the development team with all the right tools? And how do you empower your team to actually be understanding what it is that your potential is, where you can be focusing your efforts, where you feel that's important, and how can all of the others, that 88% of those that aren't in your major gift or planned giving totals, how can they be incorporated into this funnel that you can be focusing on empowering them to be understanding the information they need, the education they need, and the empowerment that they need to be achieving that. Kensho, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, before even saying like, oh, let's just throw AI here and there, just like looking at step one is most importantly identifying. And, I know we've talked about super like AI tools that can do these things, but actually, starting off with just using AI in certain parts of your processes, right? Just getting comfortable with actually using it to maybe prepare and do some basic prospect identification, or just doing a little bit of research or planning. And just like Bill showed, even practicing before a conversation, all these things are just kind of one step into moving into the next realm of AI adoption. I would say it always starts with, your understanding of and control of where do you want to and where do you think AI should fall into, before just saying, let's throw AI everywhere. Because I think the mistake is, if you're just chucking it for the sake of chucking it, AI is only going to amplify something that's already broken, or something that doesn't even need AI in the first place. So the most important step is actually thinking, do we need AI in this place? If so, why do we need it? And when we answer that question, where exactly in part of that why does it fit in? It sometimes doesn't fit the whole thing, but maybe a certain part of it. And then just starting to experiment and using, and then finding different tools purpose built, like Gift Tabulator and like the Builder Bill that we showed just now, that are very specific to those use cases, because then you know where you can fit it in, you know why you put it in, and you actually have connected the kind of purpose with the actual kind of use case together, instead of just randomly chucking it in for the sake of chucking it in. So I think it's
yeah, a good example is that we've done a couple of training sessions over the last few months, and in those training sessions, you walk away with it. You walk away, you feel that you've imparted good knowledge and good training for the board, for the development team. But one of the things that, how much is retained, how much is applied in that process, but having something like the Builder Bill model of the AI for coaching and training allows them to actually, oh, I can just go and keep on practicing this over and over again, or I can actually put in the context of a specific donor scenario or a person I'm going to be meeting with, that actually becomes part of that implementing a smart tool. So that the tool on its own is great, but implementing it and finding the fit with its practical purpose saves a lot of time, saves a lot of frustration in terms of that preparation that's required. So I want to thank everybody for taking time. I want to thank Kensho and James again. I want to thank our Funding Matters team. Chisa, did a great job in pulling this together. Thanks for all the research that's been put into making this presentation. But our next webinar is next month on May 18th, and it's going to be focusing on accelerating fundraising impact. And impact is such an important word, because when we talk to donors are always asking the question, what kind of impact will my donation have, regardless of the size and the scope of it. But it is an important question that we want to be able to be answering as we're kind of building out your AI-powered fundraising brain. And so this is the way we're looking at it, is AI, and what we're building out is the fundraising brain for the purposes that you need, and that will benefit you in advancing your missions and your campaigns on an ongoing basis. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. And again, like I mentioned, this will be available. The recording will be available for everybody. And I encourage you to subscribe, find out about our YouTube channel, and I look forward to your feedback. Thanks again.
We are also giving out a limited access to some of our tools after the webinar. So please see the information on the follow-up email.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.